Tempted by the wild, Ryeon Tae-wook didn't he believe in fate. He believed in control, sharp suits, stricter routines, and a calendar that ticked like a time bomb. He ran his company, Lin Technologies, like a fortress. No emotions. No weaknesses. And certainly, no rivals. At least, that's what he thought. Until he walked in. It was supposed to be a simple merger, clean, corporate, forgettable. But then Han Seo-jin strolled into the boardroom like it was his stage. No entourage. No formalities. Just a smirk that said he already knew he'd win. Tae-wook didn't he flinch. He didn't he even blink. He just looked him up and down, the way a wolf sizes up another. Seo-jin he grinned wider, like he liked being watched. Their handshake lasted a second too long. Just enough to spark tension. Just enough to start a war. Seo-jin's voice was smooth, laced with amusement. So you're the legendary Ryeon Tae-wook? Thought you'd be taller. Tae-wook's eyes narrowed, sharp as glass. I didn't come here to entertain you. That was the thing about them, they were both alphas. Both dominant. Both used to being the one in control. But there was only one seat at the top, and neither of them planned to give it up. Meetings turned into verbal battles. Every negotiation felt like a standoff. But under the sharp words and cold glares, there was something else. Curiosity. Something unspoken. When Tae-wook worked late, Seo-jin was somehow still around, lounging on his desk, sipping coffee that didn't belong to him, asking questions that were too personal. And when Seo-jin laughed, Tae-wook found himself listening. Not because he cared, of course not. But because it was rare. Real. And maybe dangerous. Because even wolves have hearts. And sometimes they forget not to bite the hand that dares to reach for them. The first thing Ryeon Tae-wook learned about Han Seo-jin was this: he never shut up. He talked through meetings, over other executives, even during presentations that weren't his. It wasn't that he didn't care, no, it was worse. He was enjoying himself. Seo-jin treated business like a game. A chessboard. One where he already knew the ending. But what made Tae-wook grit his teeth the most wasn't Seo-jin's arrogance. It was that he was smart. Infuriatingly so. When Tae-wook presented a carefully structured proposal, Seo-jin tore through it in under 5 minutes, poking holes, finding loopholes, spinning it into something sleeker, faster, somehow better. And then he looked at him, that look. The one that said, "Try and keep up, old man." Tae-wook was 34. He had never once lost a battle in the boardroom. Until now, he hadn't met anyone who made him feel like he might. That night, the office was quiet. Everyone had gone home. Except them. Tae-wook was still typing, alone in the darkened boardroom, when the door creaked open. He didn't look up. "Whatever you want, it can wait until morning." Seo-jin leaned against the door frame, jacket slung over one shoulder. His sleeves were rolled up. His hair messy than usual. "I couldn't sleep," he said casually. "Figured I'd drop by and see if you were still alive. You don't strike me as the type who remembers to eat." Tae-wook glanced at the clock. 10:47 p.m. Seo-jin stepped inside without asking. Set 2 coffee cups on the table. "Black, no sugar," he said. "That is how you like it, right?" Tae-wook finally looked at him. He didn't answer the question. Seo-jin grinned. "Didn't think you'd notice me remembering? But here we are." Silence stretched between them, not heavy, Not awkward. Just thick with things unspoken. Seo-jin took the seat across from him, leaned back, arms resting on the chair. Watching. Tae-wook tried to focus on his laptop screen. Tried. But then Seo-jin spoke again, quieter this time. "You don't trust me, do you?" Tae-wook's fingers paused over the keys. "No," he replied. "And I don't plan to." Seo-jin didn't seem surprised. In fact, he looked almost amused. "Good," he said. "Because trust is boring." Tae-wook didn't respond. But that night, after Seo-jin left leaving his half-finished coffee behind, Tae-wook sat there for a long time, staring at the seat across from him. Still warm. It was supposed to be a networking retreat. 3 days in the mountains. Fresh air. Suits swapped for sweaters. Executives bonding over wine and trust exercises. Tae-wook hated it already. He hated the fake smiles, the small talk, the forced nature of it all. But what he hated most was the man who stepped off the helicopter, second wind in his hair, sunglasses on, sleeves rolled halfway up his arms. Han Seo-jin. Of course. They were assigned the same cabin. The only cabin with one room left. A cozy executive suite with 2 little space and 1 shared balcony overlooking the forest. Tae-wook stared at the front desk clerk like she had personally betrayed him. Seo-jin just smiled. "You snore, don't you?" he said. "It's always the uptight ones." The first night was quiet. They slept on opposite sides of the room. 2 beds, 2 people, 2 very different kinds of silence. Tae-wook pretended not to hear when Seo-jin tossed and turned. He didn't ask why. He didn't care. But when morning came, and he caught Seo-jin outside on the balcony barefoot, staring at the mountains with a tired look in his eyes, something shifted. Just slightly. "Didn't he sleep?" Tae-wook asked. Seo-jin blinked, startled. He hadn't noticed him. "Not used to sharing space," he muttered. "Too many walls." Tae-wook raised an eyebrow. "It's a cabin." Seo-jin gave a weak laugh. "Yeah. That's the problem." Later that day, a sudden storm rolled in. Landslide warnings. Blocked roads. Power flickering off and on like the whole mountain was holding its breath. Everyone was told to stay inside. And just like that, Tae-wook and Seo-jin were stuck. Alone. 1 room. 1 fire. No escape. Tae-wook sat near the window, trying to work. The signal was down. Of course. Seo-jin sat cross-legged on the floor, poking the fireplace with a stick like a bored kid. "You're really bad at relaxing," he said without looking up. Tae-wook didn't respond. Seo-jin grinned. "You always like this, or do I just bring out the worst in you?" "You bring out something," Tae-wook muttered. It was the first honest thing he'd said in hours. For a moment, there was only the crackle of firewood. And the sound of rain hitting the windows like it wanted in. Seo-jin's voice dropped, softer this time. "I thought you'd be colder." Tae-wook turned to look at him. Seo-jin held his gaze. "Turns out, you're just scared to be warm." Neither of them said anything after that. But that night, when the power cut out completely and the room dropped 10 degrees, Tae-wook didn't stop him when Seo-jin pulled his blanket over them both. The storm lasted 2 days. 2 long, quiet days in that single cabin. The world outside soaked in rain and fog, while inside, time moved differently. Slower. Heavier. By now, the silence between them had changed. It wasn't sharp anymore. It was thick. Charged. The kind of silence where one breath too deep might be mistaken for something else. On the second night, the generator failed completely. No lights. No heating. Just them, a dying fire, and a blanket too small for two men pretending not to care. They sat closer than they had before. Shoulder to shoulder on the floor, legs nearly touching. Neither moved. Tae-wook held a book in his hands, but he hadn't turned the page in 15 minutes. Seo-jin leaned back against the wall, head tilted, eyes half-lidded. "Ever get tired of pretending?" he asked suddenly. Tae-wook didn't look at him. "Pretending what?" "That you don't feel anything." There was no answer. Only the sound of the wind howling outside like it knew a secret. Seo-jin exhaled slowly. "You act like the world only makes sense when it's under your thumb. Like if you just grip it tight enough, nothing will fall apart." He turned his head, looking at him now. "But what happens when it already has?" Tae-wook looked up, finally. And for the first time since they met, he looked tired. Not angry. Not cold. Just tired. Their eyes met. No smirks. No clever retorts. Just two men, two alphas, with too many walls and not enough warmth. "I don't have time to fall apart," Tae-wook said quietly. Seo-jin didn't speak. He didn't need to. Instead, he shifted closer. Close enough that their knees touched. Close enough that if either of them leaned forward even just a little they'd cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Tae-wook didn't move away. And Seo-jin. He didn't lean in. He just looked at him. "Okay," he said, barely a whisper. "Then I won't let you." They stayed like that. Not speaking. Not touching. Not moving. But something between them did. It shifted. Quietly. Irreversibly. The roads reopened 3 days after the storm, back to the city. Back to cold offices and sharper words. Back to pretending. And yet, something had changed. Tae-wook arrived at headquarters early, as always. Suit pressed. Tie perfect. Expression unreadable. But he didn't stop at his usual floor. He stopped 2 levels higher. Outside a door with a silver nameplate that read, Han Seo-jin, Strategic Development. He stared at it for a full 10 seconds. Then he walked away. Seo-jin, for his part, was different too. Still smug. Still sharp-tongued. Still 2 coffees into his morning before 9 a.m. But the jokes landed softer now. The glances lingered longer. And just once he stood outside Tae-wook's office, hand raised to knock, and didn't he? He left instead. They didn't talk about the cabin. Not about the firelight. Not about the way their shoulders touched and neither of them moved away. Not about the blanket. The silence. The closeness. But it hung there. Between them. Like unfinished business. The next board meeting was tense. They sat on opposite sides of the long table, polished oak, glass reflections, and a dozen eyes between them. When Seo-jin spoke, Tae-wook didn't interrupt. When Tae-wook adjusted the agenda, Seo-jin didn't fight him on it. The others noticed. Whispers buzzed after the meeting. Was something going on? Neither of them reacted. But when the room cleared, Seo-jin stayed behind. Tae-wook gathered his notes, calm and silent. Seo-jin leaned against the table, arms crossed, watching him. "I didn't expect you to act different," Seo-jin said, his tone unreadable. Tae-wook, didn't he look up? I'm not. Seo-jin let out a quiet laugh. No. You're just better at hiding it. A beat of silence. Then, you know, Seo-jin added, if we're going to pretend nothing happened, you should at least be good at pretending. Tae-wook froze. Only for a moment. But Seo-jin saw it. And smiled, not with victory, not with cruelty. With something else. Something almost sad. That night, Tae-wook found himself alone in his office long after the lights had dimmed. He stared out the window at the city skyline. One hand in his pocket. And the other held a folded note. Slipped under his door. Just 5 words. I haven't forgotten either. Ryeon Tae-wook, didn't drink at work. That was one of his rules. A line he never crossed. Clarity over comfort. Focus over weakness. But that night, there was a glass of whiskey on his desk. Half full. Untouched. And his eyes were fixed on his phone. One name. One message. Han Seo-jin. Still at the office. He hadn't replied. He didn't need to. Because 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. And Seo-jin stepped in. No smirk. No swagger. Just him. A little damp from the rain. Hair falling over his forehead. Something unreadable in his eyes. Didn't he expect you to answer? Seo-jin said, stepping inside anyway. Tae-wook, didn't move? I didn't. Seo-jin gave a crooked grin. You never do. But I keep showing up anyway. He sat on the edge of the desk without asking. Looked at the untouched glass. You planning to drink that? Tae-wook shook his head. I don't drink with colleagues. Seo-jin turned to him. His gaze didn't waver. Good thing I'm not just a colleague. Silence again. Familiar now. Dense. Tae-wook leaned back slightly, hands clasped in front of him. You shouldn't be here, he said. Seo-jin nodded. I know. And yet, he stayed. You keep pushing people away, Seo-jin said quietly. But the truth is, I don't think you want to be alone. I think you're just afraid of what happens when someone gets too close. Tae-wook's jaw tightened. Seo-jin, didn't stop? Do you really think I didn't notice the way you didn't sleep the night I left? The way you watch me when you think I'm not looking. He leaned forward now, voice low. The way you never asked me to stop. Tae-wook didn't speak. Couldn't Seo-jin's hand brushed against his on the desk. Barely a touch. Nothing obvious. But Tae-wook didn't pull away. Seo-jin stood slowly. You don't have to say anything, he murmured. But one day, you will. He turned to leave. But just as he reached the door. Seo-jin. Tae-wook's voice was barely above a whisper. Controlled. Careful. Seo-jin turned. Tae-wook didn't look up. But the words came anyway. I didn't want you to leave. That night, Seo-jin didn't go home. But nothing happened. They didn't touch. They didn't kiss. They just sat in the quiet. In the same room. Breathing the same air. Like a war had been paused. Just for a moment. It started with a routine meeting. A minor proposal. A few department heads. Nothing explosive. Until Tae-wook walked in and found Seo-jin already at the front, sleeves rolled, tie loose, eyes sharp. Like he owned the room. He always looked too comfortable when things were meant to be professional. Like nothing could touch him. But that day Tae-wook was the storm. The meeting began civil enough. Then came the disagreement. A suggestion Seo-jin made bolder than expected, more risk than the company was used to. Strategic, yes. But reckless. Tae-wook called him out on it. Direct. Cold. Seo-jin didn't back down. They went back and forth. Words sharper. Louder. The room growing quiet. Then Seo-jin said something he shouldn't have. Maybe the problem isn't the plan, director. Maybe the problem is you. Gasps. Silence. Everyone stared. Tae-wook stood there, still and unreadable. His jaw was tight. His voice, deadly calm. Meeting adjourned. The room emptied fast. No one wanted to be collateral. Tae-wook turned on his heel. Walked out without a word. Seo-jin followed. Of course he followed. They ended up in Tae-wook's office. Door locked. What the hell was that? Tae-wook snapped. Seo-jin threw his hands up. You humiliate me in front of the board and I'm not allowed to push back. You crossed a line. No, Seo-jin growled. You built the line and expected me to stay behind it? He stepped closer. Too close. You keep treating this like it's just business, Tae-wook, but we both know it isn't. Tae-wook flinched. Seo-jin saw it. And something broke. Do you hate me that much? Seo-jin asked, voice lower now. Or are you just terrified of what it would mean if you didn't? Tae-wook didn't answer. Couldn't? Seo-jin stepped forward again, slow, deliberate. Their chests nearly touched. You look at me like you want to strangle me, he whispered, but every time I get close, you stop breathing. Tae-wook's hands curled into fists. Don't. Don't what? Seo-jin said softly. Don't make you feel something you don't want to name. Then it happened. Tae-wook grabbed his wrist. Not hard. Not to push him away. Just to stop him. His hand was shaking. Seo-jin looked down at it. Then back at him. And for the first time, he didn't smile. He just whispered, don't flinch now. You've already let me in. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch more than that. But when Seo-jin left, Tae-wook didn't let go immediately. He held on. Just a second longer. And it was enough to change everything. The days after the confrontation were a blur. Tae-wook tried to focus. Tried to do his job, like it was just another week. Another set of numbers, another set of decisions. But it wasn't the same. It never could be. Every time he passed Seo-jin in the halls, their eyes would meet just for a second and it was enough to make his heart beat a little faster. A little harder. A little dangerously. The moment came late that Friday. A dinner with investors. A dinner where the words were sweet but empty. A dinner where the promises were made, but no one really meant them. Tae-wook sat across from Seo-jin as always, his posture perfect. His eyes cold. But tonight, there was something else. It started with a glance. A fleeting one. But it lingered too long. And when Tae-wook looked away, it wasn't out of discomfort. It was out of something else. The event ended, the guests left, and the lights in the room dimmed. Tae-wook started gathering his things, acting like he wasn't already aware of Seo-jin standing behind him. Are you going to pretend it didn't happen again? Seo-jin asked, voice soft but pointed. Tae-wook froze. His back was to him. but it didn't matter. I don't know what you're talking about. Seo-jin laughed, a low sound that came from somewhere raw. Sure you don't. And then, without warning, Seo-jin's hand slid across his shoulder, stopping just above his collarbone. Not pulling him in, not grabbing him, but just there. Warm. A little too close. Tae-wook didn't flinch. Not everything is a strategy, you know, Seo-jin said, voice barely above a whisper. Some things are just you and me. Tae-wook turned slowly. Seo-jin's hand was still there. Hovering. Their faces were inches apart. Why do you make this so complicated? Tae-wook asked, the words coming out rough, like he was fighting them. Seo-jin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned in, just a little. And there it was. That moment. Tae-wook's breath hitched. And Seo-jin's lips brushed against his ear. Barely there. But enough to make everything else fade away. Because Seo-jin's voice was a low murmur, I don't want to be the one to let go. The room felt too small. The air too thick. Every inch of space between them felt like it was about to collapse in on itself. Tae-wook's eyes closed for a fraction of a second. And in that moment, he made a choice. He didn't pull away. He didn't run. He leaned in. Just a little. Their faces were a breath apart. And when he opened his eyes again, the quiet was shattered by the unmistakable tension that crackled between them. The door to the office opened suddenly. A staff member, unannounced. Seo-jin pulled away first, a slow smile curling on his lips. He looked at Tae-wook. Later, he said softly. Tae-wook didn't reply. His mind was still on that almost. But it was enough. They both knew it. Tae-wook had never been good with weakness. It was something he never allowed himself to show, not to anyone, not even the people closest to him. He controlled everything. Everything. Emotions were a liability. But tonight, the control slipped. It started with the rain. Heavy, relentless, drumming against the windows of Seo-jin's apartment. The city outside was a blur of lights, but inside, everything was still. Tae-wook wasn't sure what had brought him here, to this quiet space, just the two of them. Maybe it was the way Seo-jin's eyes lingered a little too long. Or the way the tension had been thick enough to cut through with a knife. Maybe it was just because he couldn't not come. Seo-jin poured them both a drink. Not that they needed it, but it felt like a moment of normalcy, an attempt to bridge the gap between them. Between the distance they kept for so long. But tonight, even that was different. Tae-wook took the glass from Seo-jin's hand, fingers brushing just a little longer than necessary. They both felt it. I told you, this is a bad idea, Tae-wook murmured, his voice barely louder than the hum of the rain outside. He set the glass down on the coffee table, his gaze locked with Seo-jin. As Seo-jin didn't respond immediately. He just stepped closer, one hand resting on the back of the couch. We both know it's not, he said, his voice rougher than usual. You've been waiting for this, Tae-wook. You've been waiting for me. Tae-wook's chest tightened at the words. He didn't respond. He couldn't. And then Seo-jin moved again. Just a step forward. A shift in the space between them. His fingers brushed over Tae-wook's shoulder, a touch so light it could be even a mistake. But it wasn't. Tae-wook's breath hitched as Seo-jin leaned in, their faces inches apart. You keep pretending, Seo-jin whispered, his lips so close that every word felt like it was directly on his skin, but you can't fool me. Not anymore, Tae-wook's heart hammered in his chest. His resolve, his control, it was all slipping through his fingers, too fast to catch. Seo-jin. His voice was strained, the words caught in his throat. And then, before he could say anything more, Seo-jin's lips were on his. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't an accident. It was a slow, deliberate kiss. Soft at first, tentative. As if both of them were testing the waters, afraid of what would happen if they went too deep. But then Seo-jin's hand found its way to the back of Tae-wook's neck, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened. Tae-wook didn't pull away. He couldn't. The heat between them was unbearable. Everything that had been building between them, the glances, the words unsaid, was coming to a head. When they broke apart, it was only for a breath, but neither of them moved away. They stayed close. The room seemed to shrink around them. Seo-jin's forehead rested against Tae-wook's, both of them breathing heavily. "I don't want to fight this anymore," Seo-jin murmured. Tae-wook closed his eyes, his hands moving to Seo-jin's chest, fingers trembling just slightly. "Neither do I." Without another word, they kissed again, this time harder, more urgent. It was no longer about control or boundaries. It was about surrender. About giving in to the pull they'd been fighting for too long. Their hands roamed, finding each other in the dark. Tae-wook's body pressed against Seo-jin's, the heat of them blending until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. And when they finally pulled back, gasping for air, Seo-jin's voice was soft, but the words were heavy with meaning. "Stay," he whispered, his hand still on Tae-wook's waist, keeping him close. "Don't leave." Tae-wook didn't answer. But his actions spoke louder than any words. He stayed. The morning after was silent. Not in a comfortable way. Not in a way where two people could bask in the afterglow of something new. No. It was a thick, uncertain silence. A tension in the air that neither of them wanted to name. Neither of them could. Seo-jin lay in the bed, his back to Tae-wook. The blanket was tangled around them both, but neither of them moved to fix it. The soft hum of the city beyond the apartment windows felt too loud. Tae-wook hadn't slept much. The weight of what had happened, what they had done, kept him awake. His mind raced with thoughts, but his body, it was exhausted. And yet, when his eyes drifted to the back of Seo-jin's head, his heart gave a small, unexpected jolt. This, whatever this was real. Too real. Seo-jin finally broke the silence, his voice low and raw from sleep. "You're still here." Tae-wook's throat tightened. "You thought I'd leave?" There was a pause, just long enough for Tae-wook to wonder if he'd said too much. But then Seo-jin turned, his eyes locking with Tae-wook's, no distance between them now. "No," Seo-jin replied softly. "But I expected you to want to." It was the question that had been hanging between them ever since the kiss, ever since the night they had crossed that line. Neither of them had an answer. Tae-wook shifted, pulling himself up to sit on the edge of the bed, the room still dim with early morning light. He rubbed his face, feeling the exhaustion but also something else. A nagging feeling of something new between them. "Last night," he started, but Seo-jin stopped him. "No regrets," Seo-jin said firmly, leaning up on his elbow. "None. Don't think about it too much." Tae-wook's eyes met his. The intensity in Seo-jin's gaze made his chest tighten again. And then, slowly, Seo-jin reached out, his fingers brushing across Tae-wook's shoulder, just like the night before. But this time, there was nothing tentative about it. No hesitation. Tae-wook didn't pull away. He didn't want to. Seo-jin's touch burned into him, sending shivers through his body as his hand moved from Tae-wook's shoulder to his neck, pulling him back down toward him. Their lips met again, soft at first, as if they were both still uncertain of this new territory they found themselves in. But it didn't stay soft for long. The kiss deepened, urgent and hungry, the years of tension between them finally breaking apart. Hands moved over skin, desperate, searching, needing to touch. Tae-wook pushed Seo-jin onto his back, hovering above him. He wasn't sure what was pushing him, the ache, the fire, or something deeper that he hadn't been ready to admit. But he was here now. He leaned down again, kissing Seo-jin harder, more possessive, as if he couldn't get enough. As if this moment was all they had. The weight of it, of their bodies pressed together, felt too good to question. Seo-jin responded in kind, his hand sliding over Tae-wook's chest, pulling him closer, if that was even possible. And for the first time, it didn't feel like control was in their hands. It didn't feel like strategy or distance or power. It felt like they were simply together. The hours that followed were a blur. There was no more talking. No more pretending that this didn't matter. It was raw, it was real, and it was beautiful in its simplicity. They explored each other in a way they never had before. No walls, no distance. Just them. Finally letting go of the things that had held them back for so long. When they finally lay there, tangled in each other's arms, the weight of the world outside seemed so far away. The storm was still brewing outside, but inside, the room was warm, peaceful. Seo-jin was the first to break the quiet. Stay. It was simple. Uncomplicated. But the vulnerability in his voice made Tae-wook's chest tighten. Tae-wook smiled, just the slightest curve of his lips. I'm not going anywhere. The days after the storm felt different. Tae-wook couldn't put his finger on it at first. It was subtle the way Seo-jin's gaze lingered on him in meetings, the way their conversations no longer held the same tension, the same distance. They didn't speak about the night after. The kiss. The touch. The way their bodies had finally found each other in a way they both desperately needed. But they didn't need to. Tae-wook woke up early one morning, the soft light of dawn creeping through the curtains of Seo-jin's apartment. He lay there for a moment, not moving, just listening to the quiet. And then, he felt it, the warmth of Seo-jin's hand resting on his chest, their bodies still tangled under the covers from the night before. His fingers twitched, wanting to pull Seo-jin closer, but he stayed still, unsure. He'd never done this before. Never let someone in so completely. But Seo-jin had broken through all his walls, without even trying. Seo-jin stirred, his breath soft against the back of Tae-wook's neck. Slowly, he slid his arm around Tae-wook's waist, his lips brushing the skin of his neck in a tender kiss. Tae-wook inhaled sharply at the sensation. Morning. Seo-jin's voice was rough, hushed. How did you sleep? Tae-wook could hear the question hanging between them, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't have to hide. Better than I expected, he replied quietly. Seo-jin smiled, the warmth of his lips curling against Tae-wook's skin. Good. You deserve to rest. Tae-wook shifted, rolling over to face him, their eyes meeting in the soft morning light. There was no need for words, everything that needed to be said was already written on their faces. Seo-jin reached up, cupping Tae-wook's cheek in his palm, his thumb brushing over his skin. The touch was gentle, almost reverent. You're still here, Seo-jin said softly, as if surprised by the simple fact. Tae-wook smiled, leaning into his touch. I'm not going anywhere. Their lips met in a slow kiss, tentative at first, but deepening quickly as the need to be close to feel each other overtook them both. Seo-jin's hand slid down Tae-wook's side, fingers tracing the curve of his waist before moving lower, as if memorizing every inch of his body. Tae-wook's breath hitched as Seo-jin's touch grew bolder, his fingertips brushing the edge of his shirt, teasing the skin beneath. They pulled away, panting for breath, but neither of them moved. The air was thick with desire, but there was no rush, no urgency. They both knew they had all the time they needed. Seo-jin's hands moved with purpose now, sliding under Tae-wook's shirt, his fingertips grazing over his skin, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. Tae-wook's body responded instinctively, his hands reaching for Seo-jin, wanting to touch him the same way. When their bodies finally aligned, Tae-wook could feel the heat of Seo-jin's skin against his, the way their heartbeats seemed to sync together. It was different than anything they had shared before, raw, real, unrestrained. Tae-wook's hands moved to the waistband of Seo-jin's pants, his fingers trembling slightly. Seo-jin looked at him, eyes dark with desire but softened with affection. Are you sure? Seo-jin asked, his voice a low murmur. Tae-wook didn't hesitate. I'm sure. And that was all the confirmation Seo-jin needed. He leaned in, capturing Tae-wook's lips again, this time with a deeper intensity, as if he couldn't get enough. His hands were everywhere now, on Tae-wook's back, his chest, his thighs, as if he wanted to memorize the feel of him. Tae-wook responded eagerly, his own hands roaming over Seo-jin's body, pushing him closer, urging him to touch him even more. Every kiss, every touch, felt like an unraveling. A breaking down of the walls they had both built around themselves for so long. There was no pretense now. No games. Just them. Completely. When they finally came together, the world outside seemed to disappear. There was only the soft, breathless sound of their bodies moving in sync, the rhythm of their hearts beating together as one. The tension, the desire, it had all led to this. A moment of complete vulnerability, where neither of them could hide. Neither of them wanted to. Afterwards, they lay there in the quiet, tangled in each other's arms. The room was still, but everything between them had changed. Seo-jin's fingers traced the line of Tae-wook's jaw, his touch light, almost affectionate. You're incredible, he whispered. Tae-wook smiled, a rare, soft smile that only Seo-jin could ever draw out of him. I'm not going anywhere, Seo-jin. And for the first time, he realized that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to be afraid of letting someone in. The morning light came softly, casting a warm glow across the bed where Seo-jin and Tae-wook lay. They had spent the entire night together, wrapped in each other's arms, exploring the intimacy they had both been avoiding for so long. But now, with the world outside starting to wake up, they had to face the quiet reality of what had happened. Seo-jin was the first to stir. His hand was still resting on Tae-wook's chest, his thumb brushing over the smooth skin as if he couldn't quite believe the moment was real. Tae-wook hadn't moved much. He was still half asleep, but he could feel Seo-jin's presence next to him, warm and solid. And for the first time in a long while, Tae-wook didn't feel the need to run. Seo-jin shifted slightly, his lips brushing against Tae-wook's ear as he whispered, "We've crossed a line, Tae-wook. There's no going back from this." Tae-wook's breath caught in his throat. He knew that. They both knew that. But instead of feeling afraid, there was something else, something lighter, freer. "I don't want to go back," Tae-wook replied softly, turning his head to meet Seo-jin's gaze. The connection between them deepened in that moment. It wasn't just physical anymore. There was something more, something that neither of them had been able to put into words before, and before either of them could say another word, Seo-jin leaned in, kissing Tae-wook with a tenderness that took his breath away. The kiss was slow at first, a careful exploration of the closeness between them. It was different from before, no longer about urgency or desire, but about something deeper. Something that felt real. Seo-jin's hand found its way to the back of Tae-wook's neck, pulling him closer, his lips soft against his. Tae-wook responded in kind, his own hand sliding over Seo-jin's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath his fingertips. The kiss deepened, slow and deliberate, as their bodies pressed closer, their bare skin brushing together. It wasn't frantic or wild, but there was an undeniable tension between them. A hunger. Tae-wook moaned softly into the kiss, and Seo-jin responded immediately, his hands moving down Tae-wook's body, tracing the muscles of his back, the curve of his waist. This time, there were no words. Only the sounds of their breathing and the soft rush of blood pounding in their ears. Seo-jin's fingers slid under Tae-wook's waist, lifting him slightly as their bodies aligned once more. It wasn't quick. It wasn't rushed. It was as if they were savoring the moment, both knowing it might be their last chance to just be here, with no barriers left between them. Tae-wook gasped as Seo-jin's lips trailed down his neck, his teeth grazing over his skin, making him shiver with anticipation. His body responded eagerly, pressing against Seo-jin's, the friction between them making his heart race. Seo-jin moved with a steady rhythm, each touch deliberate and slow, making sure Tae-wook felt every inch of him. The sensation was overwhelming, but it was comforting too. It was the kind of closeness Tae-wook had never allowed himself to feel before. "Stay with me," Seo-jin murmured, his voice hoarse with desire. He kissed Tae-wook again, this time more fiercely, as if to prove that he wasn't going anywhere. Tae-wook's hands tangled in Seo-jin's hair, pulling him closer as their bodies moved together in sync. The intensity between them grew with every passing moment, the lines between them blurring until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. When they finally came together, it was a slow, aching release. A culmination of everything they had built: the trust, the desire, the love that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long. They collapsed together, breathless, their chests rising and falling in time. The world outside seemed distant, as if nothing else mattered in that moment but the warmth of their bodies tangled together in the quiet aftermath. Seo-jin's fingers traced circles on Tae-wook's back, soothing him as they both lay there, savoring the silence that enveloped them. "I never thought this would happen," Seo-jin admitted, his voice soft and tired, but there was a sense of finality in it. "But now that it has, I don't think I could walk away from it." Tae-wook looked up at him, his expression serious but warm. "Neither could I." They lay there for a long time, just holding each other, letting the quiet stretch between them. Neither of them spoke, but there was no need for words. They both knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Some moments are too fragile to hold onto forever, but in the space between the storm and the calm, they found something real. Tempted by the wild ends, but their story it's only just beginning.